Hey guys, welcome back to another F1 Fantasy video looking ahead to the Austin Grand Prix, which, funnily enough, because it's a sprint race weekend and I'll get more into that into the video, it's starting today, which is great. I'm loving sprint weekends at the minute, especially two on the bounce. But let's get straight into it by looking at how well my team did at Qatar. And as you can see, it was a pretty decent Qatar result. I think the only downside was Sainz, and obviously it was a bit disappointing because he didn't start the race. He had issues, so really frustrating on that behalf. But everyone else in my team performed, which meant I moved up into the top 20,000 in the global ranks. But let's now have a look at the big changes ahead of Austin. The biggest one, at least I can think of, and I think most people will say, is Daniel Ricciardo is back in that AlphaTauri seat. Woo! Yes, good news. Sad for Liam Lawson, but great for Daniel Ricciardo. Just in time, he loves America, so it's quite good to see him back for that race. But he is now valued at 4.5 million. I'll get into this when I'm talking about teams, but my God, he's my #1 driver for your cheap drivers. Because let's get real, yeah? What is the difference between Zhou, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, Magnussen, Bottas? There is nothing. And he's the cheapest out of the bunch. It's a no-brainer to go with Ricciardo. I guarantee you his price, and if he doesn't crash out, will increase for next race weekend. And he will get you the similar points to the Zhous, the Tsunodas. Zhou's now about 2.7 more than Ricciardo, and I don't see the 2.7 gap in their points. But then price changes why the Red Bull drivers, Verstappen went up 0.2, quite explanatory. He came second in the sprint race, he got pole, he won the actual race as well, so he was always going to go up a little bit in price. And then of course Perez went down 0.2 mil, he crashed out in the sprint, and he didn't have the best race at all in Qatar. I'm surprised, to be fair, he didn't go down by more. Then you got Mercedes, where Hamilton went down 0.3 mil. Again, it's because he crashed out in the race by colliding with his teammate George Russell, meaning he obviously got that -20, but still not worth looking at, I don't believe, because he's too expensive. And Russell was gone up 0.3 mil. Now, with how Mercedes have been looking, it looks like Russell might be the go-to guy, and I'll talk about this when I'm talking about my teams. Then you've got Sainz, who went down 0.5 mil. Of course, I've spoken a little about this. He didn't start the race. His sprint race wasn't the best. Ferrari in general, I think it's time to move from them to the Mercedes, such as the Russell. So it was a shame. However, Leclerc went up 0.3 mil because he actually had a decent weekend, but it still wasn't better than what the Mercedes and McLaren showed. McLaren itself as a constructor, only a few constructors went down by quite a bit. There was quite a few -0.1s and +0.1s, not really noticeable. McLaren up 1 mil itself. Again, if you haven't been on them, it's such a shame because they are really expensive now, and the only way you would have had them is if you got them in early. And then Piastri up 1.5 mil, self-explanatory. He won the Qatar sprint race and obviously got that podium in the actual race, getting second. And his teammate went up 0.3 mil. Now, I don't know why Norris has only gone up 0.3 mil. I thought at least 0.5. He got around 41 points, I believe. So to not even, I thought he should have gone up a mil, because let's get real, he should be valued around the Russell Sainz area now. So I was a bit surprised by that, but 0.3 mil movements, still decent. Then you have the smaller drivers that I'd steer clear of that have gone up in value, which are Gasly, Stroll, Zhou and Bottas. Now I'd steer clear of them all because they're just too expensive. They all went up 0.5 mil as well, which is making them even more expensive than they were before. But then you got Albon and Magnussen, who both went up by 1 million each. Now Magnussen, he is so expensive now, steer clear of him. And it's sort of the same for Albon. Like, Williams looked like they had potential to be a good car for about 2 races, and then it's dropped off. So I don't think they are the drivers to go for. Let's get real. The difference from a Magnussen and an Albon to a Ricciardo, there isn't much of a difference, or any difference at all. So for there to be such a price gap, like Albon to Ricciardo is 5.8 million extra. Now, is he worth the 5.8 million extra? I don't think so. I really don't think so. And then, of course, I've said Tsunoda has gone up 0.5 million. He is still worth looking at, but his teammate Ricciardo is definitely the better option for now. So let's have a look at the teams you could use for Austin. So I have 3 teams for you to look at, and they are as followed: the Perez team, the Sainz team, and the Russell team. Now, funnily enough, we're at the later stages of F1 Fantasy and of F1 in general for the 2023 season, and so all the teams are going to look quite similar now, because I doubt there's going to be a lot of moving. There could be moving around with the Mercedes, McLarens and Ferrari, but I doubt Aston's going to get any better for now. So, the team is as followed: Verstappen, Perez, Norris, Piastri, Ricciardo, Red Bull, McLaren. Now, the reason for this is, of course, Norris getting you loads of points in McLaren. They look like podium contenders for the rest of the season. Same goes for Piastri, and they're both dirt cheap. They're both around 17 million and 14 million. Verstappen, of course, he's winning every single race, so you have to have him in your team as well. And then, of course, I've already said about Ricciardo, he's cheap. If you can afford Tsunoda, potentially move up to Tsunoda, but I don't think it's that deep between those two. And Red Bull and McLaren, you have to go with them. Ferrari and Mercedes are too expensive. McLaren will get you the same amount of points Mercedes will, and probably more than Ferrari, so it only makes sense to go for McLaren. And Aston Martin used to be the go-to, but with how bad Stroll's doing and how much Alonso's carrying him, it's not worth getting Aston anymore. I'd rather you take a hit in the team of the drivers and bring in Red Bull and McLaren, because as we know in F1 Fantasy, constructors are key. Now, obviously the driver I haven't mentioned yet is the Perez, and that's the Perez team. But all of the teams are the same except for removing Perez for Sainz or for Russell. Now, it really depends on how well you think they're going to do. Now, Perez, he's in a bit of a slump, so I wouldn't preferably go for him. He's still not a bad option, because you know, because of how F1 Fantasy works, if he does bad in quali and gets higher in the race, he actually gets quite a few points. But for me, same with the Sainz team. Ferrari just don't look as good, and his price has been dropping a little bit now. I think Russell would be my preference for this weekend. Now, he just doesn't have to crash. If he doesn't crash, like in Qatar, technically he did crash, but he still managed to get you loads of points. So I think Russell is the best shout for those teams. But like I've said, having Perez, Sainz or Russell in your team will all be great. Now, for anyone who can't afford this team set out, here's a few things that you can do to afford a team that is still decent. The first one, like I've been saying, Ricciardo is in this team, but if you did have someone who's more expensive than Ricciardo, replace them to Ricciardo ASAP, so you have a little bit of money saved up. Then you can also use Alonso. Now you can either downgrade Norris to an Alonso to get an extra couple million if you only need an extra couple million, or you could downgrade Sainz, Perez, Russell for Alonso, and that frees up around 5 million. So now let's move on to if you should be using any chips. Like always, it's a sprint race weekend. If you haven't used your Limitless or extra DRS, I advise you to do so. Here is my Limitless team. Might be changing it on Twitter after practice, but basically you want both Mercedes boys, you want Red Bull and Mercedes, and you want both McLaren boys with Verstappen. Pretty simple. Mercedes and McLaren are looking like the podium contenders. Perez is too much of an unknown, and Verstappen's winning every single race. Then with the extra DRS, it's as simple as this. Use it on Verstappen, and then your second best driver. So if you've got Russell, I'd advise using it on Russell. If Norris is second best driver, use it on Norris. But those two would be my main shouts. And now, I think if you've got any spare chips, like the no negative autopilot, this weekend probably would be a great one, because sprint race weekends always are a little bit more crazy. So it wouldn't be terrible using any chip this weekend. I'd advise to use any chip this weekend if you've still got some. And now let's have a quick look at my league. And thank you all so much for joining it. We have 116 people in this league. Let's go for 120 for the end of the season. And like always, I will shout out the top 5. So, keeping his number 1 spot with a very good gap to his name, El Shemali. Congratulations, keep up the good work. In second place, we have Leapers 1. Congratulations, you've kept second place. Congratulations. Sani Formel 1. Well done, you've moved up to third place. Congratulations. Rivaldi F1 team, you're in 4th. And Fast and Furious 101 is in 5th. So congratulations to all you 5. And hopefully for everyone in the league, we all have a good race weekend in Austin. But hey, that is my F1 Fantasy video for Austin. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you got something out of this video to use for your F1 Fantasy team. So I'll see you next week with another F1 video. Bye bye.